Test. We'll start shortly. We're just having a few computer issues here, but shouldn't be long. Good morning. Welcome to Transportation. We have quorum in the room, so we will get started. We have a number of regrets this morning. Councillor Chernyshenko, unfortunately, is ill today, so he won't be attending. Councillor Cockish will be, but he will be a few minutes late because of an event in his ward, and Councillor Middick may have to leave early. So we have a packed agenda. So we'll just jump right into it. First of all, there's no declarations of interest received to date. Can we confirm the minutes of September the 2nd, 2015? Thank you. Communications as noted in the agenda. The first item on the agenda is the winter overnight parking regulations, and we have a presentation for that, so we will hold that item. Secondly, we have the proposed street lighting preferred partnership City of Ottawa and Energy Ottawa, Inc., and I believe we have a delegation for that. No presentation, but a delegation, so we will hold that one as well. Number 3 is the Complete Streets Implementation Framework. We have both a presentation and a number of public delegations, so we will hold that one as well. And there's also a motion that I'll ask Councillor McKenney to introduce when we get to the Complete Streets matter. And we'll go back to the beginning of the agenda, which is the presentation on the winter overnight parking regulations. So I'll ask Kevin Wiley to come up and start that presentation. Good morning, Kevin.
Good morning. We're pleased to give a short presentation on the winter overnight parking ban regulations. With me today are Luc Gagné, who is the manager of roads, and Rebecca Coates, who is the strategic support coordinator for the department. I'll be going through a little bit of background, then the consultation that we conducted as part of the process, what we heard from the consultation, and then finally get to the proposed enhancements to the overnight winter parking ban. So by way of background, prior to amalgamation, there was some inconsistent practices with all the prior municipalities. The actual current program was established in 2002 as part of a harmonization of parking enforcement levels of service, and that was improved by Council in November of 2002. And just by way of recap, the current ban is in effect from November 15th to April 1st, when 7 centimeters or more of snow is forecasted by Environment Canada. That can also include a range, which often happens, of 5 to 10%, which is the typical range they'll give us. And no on-street parking from 1 a.m. to 7 a.m. Is allowed. However, if a permit holder is in a designated permit area, then they're exempt from the parking ban. And on average, the ban, just to put it in perspective, the ban is enacted 6 to 7 times per year. And in fact, the last 2 years, we enacted the ban 6 times per year. For the consultation, we held 3 consultation sessions. They were conducted in May and June of this year. 81 participants came out to those consultations. We also consulted with internal and external stakeholders. Those included many groups, but some of them were the Accessible Advisory Committee, the Ottawa Council of BIAs, the Parking Stakeholder Consultation Group. We also conducted a review of best practices, including municipalities across Canada. Some of those were Calgary, Toronto, Edmonton, and Winnipeg, amongst others. So what we found. Our approach is very similar to other major municipalities in Canada. There are nuances here and there, but by and large our program is consistent with what other municipalities' approaches are. What residents told us was that they feel there's a lack of parking options. In fact, that they feel trapped by the parking ban, and they would welcome options to the parking ban. There was also a bit of frustration out there, and the frustration occurs when there's a ban, their streets don't get plowed, and then specifically if they get a ticket, there's a lot of frustration. Also, the inconvenience of moving a car when the forecast is over 7 centimeters, but the storm misses us, or we don't get what was forecasted. What we did here on communication was positive. The city does a very good job at communicating the ban when it's on. They were pleased with that. However, they felt that we could increase our efforts in that. So on to the enhancements. What we're proposing in the program is to make available the 5 garages that the city owns for free parking. So the way that would work is if a ban is called, residents could park free at the garage. They would be allowed to park overnight. They would be allowed to exit free. And we feel that this is a good alternative for those residents that don't have another alternative for parking. The other enhancement that we're proposing is to give the department delegated authority during a ban, and this speaks to the flexibility that we heard when we did the consultation. There was a real lack of flexibility. And I want to be clear, we're not proposing to change the current program the way it is now. So the 7 centimeters will stay, the hours will stay, the months when the ban can be called will stay. But what the delegated authority will do is, in those circumstances when we've got something like a prolonged storm and we're not going to be plowing on the night of the forecast, we won't call the ban. And we think this will be better, giving us better flexibility to impose the ban when it's needed for operations, will decrease the inconvenience for residents. The final thing we're proposing, or one of the final things we're proposing, is to change the on-street permit parking fees. So currently the monthly fee, the annual fee we're not going to change, and the annual fee is $648. But the monthly fees are a blended fee, so it's $59 a month for any month of the year. And what happens there is the people that just buy summer permits are really subsidizing the winter operations, because it does cost the corporation more in the winter time to provide winter maintenance in those areas. So the new fees would be a drop from the $59 to $30 for the summer to better reflect the maintenance that's required in the summer, and then an increase from $59 to $140 to better reflect the maintenance that's required in the winter. And as of note, of that $140 fee, $107 are directly related to additional winter maintenance that has to be provided in the permit parking areas. Some of the other enhancements we're proposing, we're working with Planning and Growth Management's initiative on building better and smarter suburbs. And one of the things we'd like to see here is when a new subdivision or development is built, especially in the intensification areas, and you'll see on the slide some of the things we run into in some of the outlying areas out of the core. One-side parking gets implemented right away, so when residents purchase a house on that street, they understand that there's one-side parking and will be given enough room to get our plows through. And also it's not a problem for emergency vehicles, which would be another added benefit. Increase the increase the fine for parking during a ban, and this is something that we've already put in place in spring. The fine for parking during an overnight parking ban was increased from $85 to $95. It's a marginal increase, but we think it'll further help to dissuade people or help them to comply with the ban. One thing we heard during the consultation is, why don't we tow during a ban? And as members of committee will know, that during snow removal operations, we do tow cars. We have to remove the snow. During an overnight ban, we don't tow too many cars. It's virtually non-existent. So the way this would work is we would increase in areas where you see at the slide above where we just can't get the plows through. We would probably tow those cars, take them to a neutral spot that won't hamper operations, and then similar to what happens when we do snow removal, all those license plate numbers and locations are given to 311, so residents can call into 311 to find out where their car is, and they can pick it up in the morning. And then finally, we are proposing to further enhance, even though we heard we do a good job on communicating the ban, we're going to further enhance that communication, and I think it's especially important with the delegated authority in instances where we might get a forecast of 7 centimeters or more, but we're not going to call the ban for whatever reason. I think we have to communicate to residents that the ban will not be on. Next steps, we'll be building a communications plan to inform residents of the changes. If approved, the new structure will be in effect for this winter, so that would be for November 15th. And then we'll continue working with our internal partners, specifically bylaw, to ensure that our response to a ban is adequate. And at this point, I'd be pleased to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Kevin. I know how much work you and your team put into this, and it's been an ongoing issue for years. And I think there's a lot of interesting ideas you have in there. I want to give you one direction, though, and I hope that you can accept it. We are seeing a bit of a jump in the cost if you buy on a monthly basis as opposed to a yearly basis. And I'm wondering if staff is open to keeping all the same numbers as we have in the current report, the current recommendations, but if someone opts to buy a yearly pass, that they could pay that in quarterly installments.
Chair, staff would support that, and we'll take that as direction.
Okay. And I had one question, and then I've got Councillor Wilkinson and Councillor Manette on the list, and Councillor Middick. And that is to build on the option of people being able to park in city lots. Is it possible for staff to also compile a list of private lots and what their rates, overnight rates may be, and we could have that online to give people another option?
To the chair, yes.
Okay, thank you for that. So first we go to Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm a little concerned that you base your costs simply and solely on the cost of maintaining that part of the street. People are actually renting a place because you actually mark them that these are reserved in certain areas just for people who have parking passes, which means it's not the same as a free street where anybody can park. And I think there should be a value to that. So having only $30 in the summer, maybe it should be $40. I don't have a problem with having the differential rates, but we're only basing it on our actual operating costs, and we're actually renting them space. That's real space we own, and if it was on private property, they'd pay a lot more than that. And Mr. Chair, I just think that there's a fixation on the cost of the city without thinking about what the value of the property is. Maybe that's because I worked in real estate for so long, but and it is giving them, when we rent a space at the bus places, get a gold space, they only have to pay for their bus pass. They have to pay $50-some, I think it is now, per month, so that there's a reserved space. That's all year round, of course, but it's even in the summer. So I think we should be charging. We've got a budget crunch going on here, and there's a place, not a lot of money, but we shouldn't be looking at not having funds there. So I'd like to know your view on that. I've got a whole bunch of questions. I don't know if I would do them one at a time or add them up. The other one, in the winter time, I have no problem with people who bought a permit being able to use the city garage for free. I do have a problem with people who don't buy permits using the garages for free. They could feed them up. I think we should have maybe it's just a small fee that you get a permit that allows you to use those garages on winter nights. It's just a smaller fee, because otherwise the people who don't pay anything could fill those garages up, and the people who have paid their monthly fee can't get in. That's a question that I have, and because you said it's free for everybody. And the third thing has to do with the areas like where I live. Lots of people have too many cars. There are no city garages they can go to. There are no private parking paid lots that you can go to. So they tend to leave them on the street, and you don't get out there to actually ticket them very often, and so we end up with a grand, glorious mess on all the streets. And I'm wondering if we could not try to find some locations outside the green belt. Maybe it's where you try to do it earlier. Maybe it's allowing them to use the park and rides overnight, as long as they're out by 7 in the morning. But I think we need to look at some place where they can go. I have one cabin, I tell you, there's 5 individuals that own that house. It's a band. They each have a car. They're in a townhouse. They can squeeze 2, sometimes 3 if they go a little on the garage off the road, but they certainly can't get 5 off. There are lots of people that have 2 or 3 cars, but have placing. The garages tend to not be used for cars anymore. They're used for snow blowers, grass cutting, bicycles, whatever, but not cars. And sometimes there's only room for 1 on the driveway. And I know parking on one side of the street, but I guess that's going to be my 4th question. One helps when it's not snowing, but doesn't help on snow days. So we think we haven't got a solution yet for that side of the Greenbelt, and there's a lot of people there, and an awful lot of them now are in higher density housing. And the 4th one, on the parking on one side of the street, right now all we can do is have a petition to have that happen. I've had a number of those because the problem is quite serious. Is there some way we can do it without having a petition on existing streets?
To the chair, I'll try and answer those questions in sequence. The permit fee, actually, I mean, anybody's allowed to park on a city street except for the 3-hour restriction during the day. So the permit fee, even though it's lower in the summer, does reflect the true cost.
But you have signs saying only permit people can park in these areas.
Correct, but outside of those areas, anybody can use the city street for parking. So I do think that the current fee structure in place does reflect the fact that we are operating, and in fact, that is the nature of the permit fee program, is that it's a cost recovery program. The idea of giving the city garages as an alternative for residents, that's actually for residents that don't have a permit fee. So it would be for residents that live in the outside the green belt that don't have an alternative to park. The idea would be they could keep their car in one of the lots. I know they're primarily in the core, and they could take transit home, and they don't have to deal with having to find some spot to put their car.
Lots of them don't have transit at night. The transit is not great in our areas.
Okay, but that was the philosophy. Overnight outside the area, in terms of surface lots at recreation centers or park and rides, we did consider that, Chair, and the problem there is when people want to park there, that's when we have to do our maintenance as well, and we have to get those overnight. We have to get the overnight maintenance done for the park and ride people that come in the morning, so that's a bit of an issue. One thing we did think of, and I think it works well with your suggestion of other private lots, if there are other private lots that are covered lots outside of the green belt, we can approach those, and potentially even some of the shopping centers like Place d'Orleans or Bayshore, they may be willing to allow us to park there. And then one side of the street, it is currently done via petition, Chair, by the residents. However, the general manager does have delegated authority to implement parking restrictions where there are safety or other concerns. So that may be one vehicle to implement one-sided parking.
Thanks for that.
Somebody, I feel strongly enough about these that I may be putting some motions forward at council, and if somebody wants to do them here.
Well, that's certainly your option. I think we've built it on a cost recovery model, and it does that. I don't think we're here to make money off of street parking during the snow ban. So I think the logic behind the report and the recommendations is sound, and I'm glad your staff is prepared to reach out to places like the shopping malls to see if some arrangements can be made in that regard as well for people outside of the Greenbelt. Councillor Manette.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Looking at the report, it says that fines will not be given until November 2016. What's our rationale for not enforcing it next winter?
It's just to allow, through the chair, it's allowed to allow people to get used to the new program and the new structures.
So what will happen now this winter if anybody parks on the street and there's a snow advisory? Will they just be given a warning, or?
Through the chair, they'll receive the old fine on the ticket.
They'll receive the old fine, so not just a warning. That's what I was concerned.
That would be the intent, Chair.
Yeah, okay. Is if it was just a warning, then definitely I would have an issue with it. Now, the control for parking inside the city buildings, I think garages is a great idea. The only concern I have is what volume of, have you estimated how many vehicles would be using it if that was put in place?
Through the chair, we don't know how many people would use it, but we do have 1,700 spaces available.
Okay, but 1,700 spaces are filled up by 8 o'clock in the morning, either this garage or the one downtown for people coming into the city to work.
And to the chair, we would make sure that they're out of there prior to that. So that would be the idea.
Yeah, so there would be time limits as to when they would have to move their vehicle?
Correct.
Okay, have you figured out what the time limits would be yet? Or?
No, through the chair, we'll work on that going forward.
Okay, I think that's something that would be very important. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Minnick.
Thank you, Chair. I missed it. We're going to increase the fines from 55 to 85, or it already is 85?
Excuse me, just a minute.
Sorry.
Is it 85 to 95? 85 to 95, Chair.
Oh, 85 to 95? Okay.
Correct. That's actually done already.
So it's going to go up to 95 next year?
Correct.
Okay. And then you mentioned you have neutral spots to tow vehicles to if they're caught during the ban. I have several streets, I'm sure, that look a lot like the one you used in the example there. How will these neutral spots, first of all, what is a neutral spot?
To the chair, the way it works for snow removal is we'll do alternative streets when we remove snow, so we'll always have a street available that's been removed to put cars there. I don't foresee this being used widespread. I foresee it used only in instances where you saw where there's parking on both sides of the street and we just can't get our plows through.
Okay, so you don't have a lot somewhere in mind where you're going to put the cars if they're towed?
To the chair, typically it would be a street that's already plowed. We would just tow it around the corner.
Okay. And then kind of touching on what Councillor Wilkinson was talking about, on the suburbs, we don't have any covered parking lots or anything. Is there any chance we could have a spot that would be maybe plowed first or something where we could advise people to park that would be more advantageous to them?
To the chair, typically we are plowing overnight those lots as well, but it's something we could look into.
Okay, great. And last question, I've had a lot of, it's kind of to do with parking overall. During the summer and last fall and winter, I had several residents that were ticketed for parking and things like that, and then this summer as well, on streets where they are a little narrow. Is there any consideration being given to permits for the suburbs for parking?
And to the chair, the permit program can be implemented anywhere in the city.
Okay.
But as I said, it's a cost recovery program, so you would need a critical mass of residents that would sign on and use the permits. And oftentimes our experience is seen in the suburb areas. There's a small number of residents that would want the permit area, but it wouldn't be enough to cover the cost of putting up the signs and administering the permits.
So we just need enough residents on the street to want the permits to implement the program?
Correct.
And that would be good year-round?
Correct.
Awesome. Okay, thanks.
Councillor Derouz, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I have a few questions. You said that when we plow the street, that we'll tow them to a common area or a specific area. Who would pay for the towing?
Currently, the resident would get a ticket, and they wouldn't pay for towing.
Okay. My other question will be, through you, Mr. Chair, is do we have, when we have an application called, right now we use is, where is my plow? Will we be able, because anyway, we're sending the license plate to 311 right now in the meantime and letting them know so people can call and know where their car. Will it be efficient if we can add another feature throughout where is my plow that we can identify the license plate and it create hotspot, and then so bylaw will be able to come in and ticket the street while they're doing, so the bylaw will be there ticketing, and that will help maybe with the violators.
Through the chair, so I believe the councillor is talking about a more effective bylaw response. That would be a great idea. I don't know if we have the technology to do that right now, but it's something we could look at and working towards.
Thank you.
Councillor McKinney, please.
Thank you, Chair. So, I used to enjoy winter before I landed in this job. I used to welcome good snowstorms, and this job is ruining that for me. Besides that, I love it. So I do appreciate the notion and the direction from the chair that if a resident today is paying $648 annually, that we can at least allow them to pay that in a quarterly fashion, so that they're not faced with such a huge jump, because we're looking at somebody who today was expecting to pay $59 a month in December, January, February, who will now be paying $140. So at least the quarterly from the annual rate does help with that. I have a few questions, though. I'd like to, just picking up on I think it was Councillor Manette was saying, so for 2016, it will just be a warning that anybody gets during overnight parking ban. Is that correct?
Through the chair, no, I should correct that. We will be issuing tickets.
Okay. Is there any way that I could get, or council could get, the number of annual pass holders that we have? I know that I asked for it yesterday, but it was quite last minute, so before council.
We'll attempt to get that for you, Chair.
Okay. And I just wonder what your rationale was for such a divergent number, like 30 for the summer versus 140. It just seems like, I wonder why that couldn't have been phased in, or what the rationale was for such a wide range between the two.
Through the chair, as I said, the majority of the winter permit fee is made up of the extra maintenance that's required in the winter, so we're just going from a blended rate to a true cost rate.
So it only costs $30 a month to park like that. It just seems like not a reasonable amount of money for a piece of real estate, say downtown. For I don't know how big exactly a parking spot is, but it just doesn't seem like 30 seems like very little. 140 seems like an awful lot. And I get why we would charge more for somebody who only bought a monthly pass in the winter downtown, because it does cost us more and it does end up clogging our streets if the plow has to go around. I understand all that. I just wonder why such a large range.
Through the chair, just to be clear, we're not paying, the permit fee doesn't cover the cost of a parking spot like in a private parking garage. What it covers is the cost to administer the permit program, so the extra signage, the administrative cost of issuing those permits, and then the blended fee included the winter and the summer maintenance costs. And the summer costs are very low. It's a sweeping cost. And the winter costs are very high, so we've just gone again from a blended to a true cost.
I guess the other piece, Kevin, not to interrupt, but is the permit does not guarantee you a fixed location either. You get a zone that you can park in, but you can't always park at a particular spot, as you would if you bought a parking spot in a garage, for example. Isn't that correct?
That's correct, Chair.
So this is revenue neutral then for us? We're not making any, are we going to be pulling in any extra revenue over, say, 2016 over 2015 as a result of this?
It's meant to be cost neutral, Chair.
So when we look at the end of 2016, the parking program, unless, of course, more people buy the permits, won't have costs. We will not be bringing in extra revenue into the city as a result of these changes.
Through the chair, that's the intention.
Councillor Deans.
I'm just following on Councillor McKinney's train of thought here. I guess for me, it just seems like a really big change in a very short time frame. And I just wonder how much public consultation you did with affected residents in these areas.
Through the chair, the consultations were open. The permit fees were certainly part of the consultation. As I said, we had 81 people attending those 3 consultation sessions.
So where and when did you do them? How many people attended? Like if I was living downtown and needed to on-street parking, would I have been aware that this was happening?
Through the chair, we do advertise it, so there was extensive advertising, and some of the councillors advertised it in to their own wards. The locations were Overbrook, Ron Cobus Centre, and Glen Cairn Community Centre.
Was there anything downtown?
Through the chair, we elected to go sort of east and west to capture the city.
But the biggest impact was downtown.
That's correct, Chair.
That doesn't make any sense to me, why you would not do a consultation with the people that are going to be most affected.
Chair, on top of that, there was a web. They could write in their comments through the web. There was advertising on the web as well.
Okay, so just getting back to the fees, I mean, I understand the principle of cost recovery, and I understand that winter maintenance is much more expensive, but if I was living downtown and needed on-street parking, all of a sudden today I hear from a committee meeting that my cost is rising from $59 to $140, $148, whatever it is, for the next 4 months. That's a huge jump that I haven't planned for financially. So I'm just wondering if, we could have phased this in a little bit different. If it's cost recovery, it doesn't necessarily have to go $30 for summer and $140 or $48, whatever it was, for winter in one fell swoop without a lot of phase-in. So I just wonder if there's an opportunity to rethink that a little bit and make it a softer landing for the people that are going to be impacted.
I think through the chair, we could certainly look at that. Just to put it into context, Councillor McKinney had asked what the ratio of annual permits to monthly permits is. And even though I don't have that at my fingertips, looking at the breakdown, it looks like there's probably about 100 people citywide that only buy winter permits. The discount available by buying an annual permit is actually in the new rate, $152. So you save $152 over a monthly rate if you buy your annual rate. And to reiterate, the annual rate is not changing.
So how many people just buy winter passes?
Chair, through my estimation here, it's about 100. And I should further say that if people are buying winter passes just to avoid the overnight parking ban, we have now given a free alternative to those people. They can go park for free, and they can avoid buying a parking permit altogether.
Okay, thank you.
Any other question? Oh, Councillor Wilkinson.
Two others that came up from the discussion. When you're parking on it's mentioned that you could get parking permits outside the core. Every time I've asked about that, I've been told it's completely not allowed outside the core, outside the green belt at least. And I was just wondering if I've been getting the wrong information, because I have had people asking about it.
Through the chair, that's not correct. Any area can apply for a permit parking zone, but as I said, it has to be cost recovery. So we need about, I'm going off the top of my head, I think about a 50% uptake on permits in that any given zone.
Okay, so they once sold a permit to one of my people, and then they were told it was no good. They still ticket them. So that was just an error, I guess, that happened along the way. Okay. And the other question was you said their cost recovery. Does the cost recovery include putting in for what we call life cycle costs, and you're going to eventually have to repave those roads, fix some catch basins, etc.? Is that cost included in your costing, particularly for the summer, because that's when you do that work?
No, it doesn't. Through the chair, it doesn't include those types of life cycle costs.
Because it should if you're doing total recovery costs, and I'd like you to look at that sometime. That's not for right now, but I'd like to know what that would be. It may not be a huge amount, but it's still taxpayers paying for something that's exclusively used by only certain people.
Through the chair, I think we could look at that, but I'm not sure how we would go about that. The other point is anybody that parks on the street would have to be paying into those life cycle costs.
Anybody parking on the street is paying through their property taxes. People who have exclusive use, I'm talking about the people, because you have signs up and I can't go and park there. So you're not actually opening it up to everybody. It's not the same thing if you can park on the street freely and if you restrict it where you can park because it's reserved for somebody else. It's a different matter.
Thank you, Councillor. I would suggest the wear and tear wouldn't be any different whether you're parking there with a permit or parking there without a permit. It's still a car parking in the spot. So I don't see how I could be proven wrong by staff, but I think the maintenance impact would be the same, and that's covered by property tax. Kevin.
Yeah, Chair, just to go back to Councillor Dean's question, well-taken question, Councillor, thank you. We did advertise consultation through the e-alerts, which anybody with a permit would get an e-alert, so all the current permit holders would have been aware of the consultation going on.
Thank you, Kevin. Any further questions or comments? Report carried? Thank you. The next item is our Complete Streets presentation. And I just wanted to say a few words about this as Colin makes his way up here.
Mr. Chair, wasn't it the lighting?
Oh, I'm sorry. Colin? Actually, you can sit back down, Colin. My error. Thank you, Councillor Fleury. I'm so excited about Complete Streets, I just want to get there. We have the proposed street lighting preferred partnership between the City of Ottawa and Energy Ottawa, Inc. We don't have a presentation on that, though, again, Kevin Wiley is here to answer any questions. We do have one public delegation. Is Mr. Mike Sharp here? If you want to come to the mic, Mr. Sharp. And I believe this morning you're here on behalf of Black & McDonald. Okay, you have 5 minutes. Thank you very much.
As an electrical contractor, we're sometimes challenged. Mr. Chair, councillors, Black & McDonald is the current maintenance provider for the City of Ottawa street lighting system, and as you can imagine, any change to the current business model is of significant interest to us. We endorse the conversion of the street lighting system to LEDs and support the implementation as soon as possible. We think it's good public policy. It reduces greenhouse gases, improves safety in the neighborhoods, the driving conditions are improved, and there are, as you saw in the report, considerable energy savings. According to our calculations, the 58,000 conversions, the $4 million in energy savings may be a little light, but it's probably best to be conservative rather than too aggressive. Regarding the maintenance savings, let me provide a bit of history in our involvement with the city. In 2004, Black & McDonald submitted an unsolicited proposal under the Ottawa option for streetlight maintenance. Included in that scope of work were the regular maintenance, which was being done by Hydro Ottawa, cable cuts, locates, that's the call before you dig operation, the knockdowns, which includes any pole that's knocked down by drivers and accidents, and the night patrols. After considerable negotiation with the city, a deal was reached to reduce the city's overall costs in those areas by 20% per annum. We did that, and at the same time markedly improved the standards of performance. Where the SOPs before were a maximum of 21 days to repair a light, ours was reduced to 7, and we accomplished this 99.2% of the time. Total savings over the 10-year period have been in excess of $7 million. We have also saved the city upwards of $250,000 per year on the knockdowns. This is what it was costing the city back in 2005 before we took over. We capped that loss for the city at zero. So that's been our experience. I think it's been good for both parties. Which brings me to the maintenance part of the report. It's unclear to us in there as to what extent Hydro Ottawa will perform some of the maintenance functions with their own staff. This is a bit of a concern to us as a contractor and as a taxpayer. We would recommend that all 5 elements of the street lighting contract, the cuts, the locates, the knockdowns, the maintenance, the night patrol, be bundled in together with the LED conversion. You are able to manage the risk, you're able to establish a fixed cost, and it will give the city cost certainty, something that the city, in our experience, wishes. So the bundling is important. We also believe that the savings that are in the report are somewhat aggressive, and I'll give you 2 examples. On the knockdowns, if a streetlight pole is damaged or destroyed, we have to replace it at no cost to the city. We pursue the driver or owner or insurance company for those costs. As I said before, the city was losing money. We capped that at 0. Some years, it is to our benefit. Others, like last year where we had the long winter, like you did, we lost money. When we lose money, that money is out of Mr. McDonald's pocket. If Hydro loses money, where does that money come from? A lower dividend or raising the fees? It's unclear, to me anyway. The other issue would be in the locates. The introduction of the city's tree planting initiative a few years ago and the transition to Ontario One Call saw an exponential rise in the number of locate requests. In 2013, we did 18,000 locates. In 2014, for half a year with Ontario One Call, we did 30,000. This year, we are on track to do 70,000 locates. We are losing money. I won't be sad to see that part of the contract go, but at $10 or $20 a locate, you're up over $1 million. We get paid $365,000. So somebody is going to have to assume that cost. So, as I said, I think the savings are somewhat aggressive, but manageable if...
I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up. You're over your 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, the bottom line is that we support the LED conversion. We also support the initiative to go to Energy Ottawa, provided that they would bundle things and go out to the public the contracting basis for your street lighting maintenance. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for coming down this morning. Are there any questions for the delegation?
I do have a question.
For the delegation or for staff?
For both.
Okay.
Quick question for you, sir. I understand you're concerned that the transfer of the work or the additional work now with Hydro Ottawa, you'll be in a position to bid for those works, I assume. Is that correct?
I'm not sure how Hydro Ottawa plans to do that, whether they plan to do it with their own in-house forces or contract out some of it. It was unclear to us.
But you would be in a position to bid for it?
Certainly.
Okay. Thank you.
If they do, we will be there.
I don't know, Kevin, if you can shed any light on how the process is going to work with Hydro Ottawa, whether it's going to go to a bid or not going to go to a bid, or if you know.
Yeah, to the chair, and Hydro Ottawa representatives are here today, so if I misspeak, I might get a sheet at the back of the head, but or they may come up and clarify. The intention is that the majority will be contracted out, and in fact, this service hasn't been tendered since just after amalgamation, so it's been about 15 years before since it's been tendered. Black & McDonald has been a very good partner, and they've come to the table, but the majority of the work will be tendered out by Ottawa Hydro.
I'm not sure Hydro Ottawa is in the crowd. Is that accurate? Okay, thank you. I hope that gives the delegation some clarity on the issue.
It does, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, perhaps you could come down and just say what you just said on the mic so that everybody can hear it. Thank you. And if just for the record, if I know you're with Hydro Ottawa, but if you identify your position and your name, that would be helpful. Thank you.
So good morning, everyone. My name is Roger Marsh. I'm the Chief Energy Management Officer with Hydro Ottawa, and ultimately responsible for the, I guess, the execution of this project. And I just want to confirm that our plan is to definitely go to market for about 85% of the project value of the both on the street lighting conversion side and the maintenance side.
Thank you for that. I see legals come to the table. Have we done something wrong?
No. Nothing wrong, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to clarify that the proposed partnership that we're talking about here is with Energy Ottawa Incorporated. And I know everybody around the table knows that there's Hydro Ottawa Holdings and Hydro Ottawa Limited, the electrical distributor, and then Energy Ottawa. But both for the record and just for Committee 1 to remind everybody that it is with Energy Ottawa. Naturally, because of the relationship among the three companies, there will be synergy. There will be expertise that Energy Ottawa will be able to tap into with Hydro Ottawa, et cetera. But just want to make sure that that clarification was provided.
Okay, thank you for that. Are there any other questions for the delegation, or while we've got Hydro Ottawa at the table, or for staff? For staff, Councillor Fleury.
This is for staff, and it's not specific to the delegation. I just want to be clear on, really a favor in terms of these energy efficiency. Kevin, we've talked about this in the past. I just want to make sure there's 2 points that I'd like some clarity on. One is in terms of our priorities. So it's properly scaled out in the report. We know how many will be done per year. Is there a way for us to do it sooner in 2016, or is that budget factors? Because what I'm seeing is the bulk of the work is in 2017 when we know we're going to host so many events across the city. I wonder if we can scale a bit earlier so that our main streets and so on get that clarity of light ahead of that period.
Through the chair, we can certainly adjust the schedule, and the intention would be not to, during 2017, to go to those areas that wouldn't be impacted, wouldn't impact the 2017 celebrations.
And then in terms of most community impacts, I imagine main streets are an area of attention and focus. I wonder if through the plan we're going zone of the city, or we're actually going main street to main street and then slowly trickling into residential areas.
Through the chair, we haven't set up the implementation schedule yet. I think we're a ways away from that, but certainly once we've got it set up, we would be consulting with councillors so they're comfortable when they're getting the conversions in their areas.
I'm on record to say that main streets should be the top priority in my mind. And my final question is around, so 311 for a resident. If after this agreement comes into play, what changes so that there's a burnt light or there's a pole down? We will still take the Service Ottawa call for the issue and will relate through our partners as is today, or does that change for our community?
No, through the chair, that's correct. The beauty of the new technology, however, is that residents won't even have to call in. We'll know if there's a burnt light or a knockdown pole before they will. There's a smart node that's being put on the light, and it'll tell us exactly when that light's out.
Thank you.
Councillor Drouze.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's a question. Do we have an estimate? I look at the report, but I couldn't find an estimate per retrofit. Do we have an estimate each one, how much will cost?
The average cost per lamp, per pole, per system will be $541.
Second question is, with all the new subdivision now are we coming, can we have it requirement as fast as we can roll it so we don't install an old style, then we're going to retrofit them, it's going to cost the taxpayer money? So.
Through the chair, that's correct. We've already put that practice into place. So for the last year, any new developments are getting LED lights.
Any other questions? Well, thank you all. And report carried?
Carried.
Thank you. Now we can get to complete streets. Again, as Colin is on his way up, I want to thank VVC, I think, who's in the room as well, and Colin and the rest of the team for the work that and Cornell is coming up as well, for the work that they have put in on this very important project. This report and the process that we'll be unrolling today is really very much a collaborative project with numerous stakeholders. I know that Colin and his group met with many members of the public and many groups to get their feedback, get their ideas as to how we proceed with this. And the result, I think, is significant. It introduces some very interesting concepts, especially the use of multimodal levels of service to assess road designs and allocate right-of-way. Colin will explain this in a lot more detail, but it's a new way of looking at this, and it's one that so far the feedback that I've received as chair has been very positive from the stakeholders. The rollout and the implementation of this process, I think, will be transformative for the city in how we view our roads and our reconstruction. We have a number of speakers today that have come out, and overwhelmingly they have come to speak in favor of the project. I look forward to the dialogue and changing how we build our roads in partnership with our communities and our stakeholder groups. Before I turn it over to Colin, though, I've asked Councillor McKinney, the Vice Chair, to introduce a motion in relation to Complete Streets on my behalf. It's just easier than me leaving the chair and introducing it. So, Councillor McKinney, if I could ask you to do that at this point so people have it in their minds as we hear the presentation and the delegations.
Thank you, Chair. Do you want me to paraphrase you, or would you like me to read it out?
I think you can just go to the,
Right to the
therefore be it resolved.
Okay, thank you. Therefore be it resolved that staff report back to the Transportation Committee in Q4 2016 to identify the projects that have been examined and implemented through the Complete Streets lens for 2016 and those planned for 2017.
Thank you very much. The reason I wanted that introduced is I don't want to lose the momentum of this lens and this project, and so we will know on an ongoing basis how we've implemented and where we're going next. So obviously I'm very much going to be supporting this motion when we come to that point, but I'm going to turn it over to Colin now and Cornell to present, and then we'll hear from our delegation. So if anybody has any questions for staff, they can just jot them down, and we'll get to those after we hear from the various delegations.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just like to acknowledge the presence of the consultant, Brian Hollingworth, who helped to develop this framework for Complete Streets. The presentation will be 6 minutes. Colin will be providing it, so I think we are ready for it. Thank you.
Thanks, Cornell, and to you, Chair. The Complete Streets implementation framework really is about the mechanics to put into practice the complete street policies that Council approved back in November of 2013 as part of the Transportation Master Plan update. Section 7.1 of the Transportation Master Plan directs staff to design and build complete streets, as well as to update all of our processes and documents and guidelines to reflect complete street principles. And it also directs staff to use multimodal levels of service to assess road design and to allocate right-of-way. So the Complete Street Implementation Framework before you today achieves all of this and really provides the foundation to implement the complete street policies that are now in our Transportation Master Plan. A definition for complete streets was drafted as part of this project in collaboration with all of the various key stakeholders that participated in this project. The definition is shown here, and it not only describes what a complete street is, which is a street that accommodates all modes of transportation, but it also implies that we will be incorporating the complete streets process into our routine processes, and that we'll be looking to every transportation project as a way to implement complete streets. I'd here like to provide a few Ottawa-specific examples about the complete street elements through the lens of the proposed implementation framework. Key to the whole framework is the land use policy context that drives or influences the design. So in this way, complete streets look different in different locations, and in rural areas, a complete street element can be as simple as providing paved shoulders to better accommodate pedestrians and cyclists. Small, quiet residential streets that don't have bicycle lanes or sidewalks would still be considered complete because vehicle speeds and volumes tend to be very low and the street operates as shared space. And as we move up the road hierarchy into urban collector roads and arterial roads, the framework starts to suggest more separation is needed between the modes, and we have a lot of good examples of these complete street elements as shown here throughout the city. An important new tool that we're developing to help implement complete streets is our multimodal level of service tool. This is a performance tool that is applied to each mode of transportation. For motor vehicles, the method has been well established, and We've been using it for decades now. The implementation framework in front of you today doesn't make any changes to the motor vehicle performance methodology. It continues to be based on lane utilization and delay. What's new for this implementation strategy is the new performance measures for the rest of the modes, for pedestrians and cyclists and transit, as well as trucks. For pedestrians and cyclists, the performance measures are based on assessing safety risks, comfort, and stress. For transit, it's based on evaluating reliability and delay of our transit vehicles. And for trucks, it's about evaluating how heavy vehicles move around the city and consider factors such as lane widths and corner turning radius. So these factors are well described in the staff report. The next step in the multimodal level of service process is to consider what the performance should be for each of the modes given the land use policy context. And what's shown here are some guideline level of service targets based on official plan policies and land use designations. These policies prioritize active and sustainable modes such as walking, cycling, and transit in our central area, around transit stations and schools. And as we move further away from the central area, out into the rural areas, the priority is focused more on automobiles and heavy vehicles. So as part of this project, we collaborated with a number of different staff from various branches and departments through the corporation, responsible for all aspects of transportation-related projects, from project initiation through to operation and maintenance. And the public consultation for this project was quite extensive. We consulted with all of the key stakeholders, including the Greater Ottawa Truckers Association, the Student Transportation Association, Ecology Ottawa, Citizens for Safe Cycling, several business improvement associations. There was a public information session that was held here at City Hall. It was well attended, and staff presented the framework to the Accessibility Advisory Committee and to several community associations. In general, the framework has been well received, and we've received several local specific issues, and we're reviewing those. To summarize, the implementation framework before you today really represents the foundation to implement the complete street policies that are now in our transportation master plan. It will help to define expectations for transportation-related projects, and it will help to improve internal communications and coordination to address operational issues such as winter maintenance. And really key to the whole project will be scoping projects early and to align them with our corporate asset management program. So really the next steps for this project, if approved by council, would be to have staff to continue to monitor the complete streets implementation framework, including the multimodal level of service tool, more staff training and public communications about complete streets would be needed, and continuing to update all of our processes and guidelines and documents to reflect the complete streets implementation framework. So that concludes the formal presentation. We'd be pleased to take some questions now.
Thank you very much. We are going to move to delegations, as I said, but Councillor Nussbaum has asked that he be allowed to ask staff a quick question before that, because he's going to have, he has a commitment at 11 o'clock that he has to leave for. So I said if it was short and we didn't keep the public waiting too long, that would be all right.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm here just to ask a very brief question. I think the report is great, and congrats to staff on the excellent work. I actually just recently went through a complete street reconfiguration on Saint Laurent for a stretch, and it was a great success. And I can say to colleagues that it needn't cost a lot of money. We did this really just with line paint. So although this looks comprehensive, the point is actually you can do it lightly and cheaply and quickly. So that's the good lesson from that experience. My question is very specific. I'm looking at page 20 of the appendix of the report, which I think is it's called the guidelines. And I'm looking at page 20. And Exhibit 20 talks about TKLOS segment evaluation table. And it looks as if, from what I gather, this talks about the curb lane width and then has scores depending on whether you have 2 travel lanes or more than 2 travel lanes. And my question is very simple. It seems like you're scoring curb lane widths that are wider with a better score. And that puzzled me because we know from the research that the minute you get to lane widths that are wider than about 3.2, 3.3 meters, the collision rate increases, the fatality rate and the injury rate from accidents that occur in those lanes increases. So I would have thought that you would want to limit lane widths to something around the 3.2 meter range in order to have safer streets. But here it seems you're doing the opposite. You're providing a higher score for wider lanes. So I hope I misread it, and maybe I did, but I'm wondering if you can explain that scoring system. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chair, the level of service for trucks does provide a higher level of service for wider lanes for the truck level of service. And what's important is the targets for trucks in different areas of the city. On a truck route, it's important to have sufficient lane widths and corner turning radii, but once we get into communities and local streets and in where trucks are not normally functioning, this is where we would look to provide a lower level of service target for trucks.
And so the idea would be when you're balancing in a multimodal LOS situation and you're balancing needs, even if you had an A, I mean, you would be willing to take a lower score even on truck. I have truck routes going through essentially residential streets at times, and so the question would be, you would be willing to sacrifice and would take a balanced approach in terms of establishing lane widths in order to take into account the pedestrian safety and accident-related consequences of wider lanes.
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
I appreciate that. That was short. We're now going to go to delegations, of which we have a number. The first is Liz Bernstein, who is here on behalf of the Lowertown Community Association. Good morning, Liz. You're no stranger here, so I think you know how it works.
Good morning, Councillor Aglai and other councillors. Thank you for having me. I am speaking on behalf of 15 organizations, so we beg your indulgence for perhaps a couple of extra minutes, but I will try to be brief. I am indeed the president of the Lowertown Community Association and have the privilege to share a letter and other points to you on behalf of several organizations and community associations. We take this matter very seriously. We organized a meeting, as Colin mentioned, Community Association Forum on Environmental Sustainability, organized a meeting in August where we focused on this issue, had a presentation, and shared the community priorities for all of us. And we're pleased that Councillor Aglai, Councillor Fleury, and Councillor Leber were there with us. So I'm speaking on behalf of the other groups today: Action Sandy Hill, Centertown Citizens Community Association, Champlain Park Community Association, Citizens for Safe Cycling, Civic Hospital Neighborhood Association, Council on Aging, Ottawa Seniors Transportation Committee, Ecology Ottawa, Green Space Alliance of Canada's capital, Hintonburg Community Association, McKellar Park Community Association, New Edinburgh Community Association, Old Ottawa South Community Association, Riverview Park Community Association, Wellington Village Community Association, and the Federation of Citizens Associations, which, as you know, includes about 40 organizations from across the city.
You needed the extra 2 minutes just for the list.
Exactly. Thank you. And the letter we shared with you yesterday and what we're speaking about today is really representing communities who care very deeply about this issue, about the safety of our streets. This is about the safety of our children, our parents, our grandparents, and ourselves. And the three issues addressed in the letter that we sent to you yesterday are calling for the approval and rapid implementation of the Complete Streets Implementation Framework to ensure Ottawa has streets that provide safe and comfortable access for peoples of all ages, abilities, and modes of transit, and calling on Council to use this 2016 budget process. Consultations are going on right now, a very important time, to accelerate funding for Ottawa's cycling and pedestrian plans, because we have good plans. And some of us will be saying so at the consultations this week. And finally, we urge you to support the revitalization of the Byward Market, especially to fund cycling connectivity and pedestrianization of the market before the 2017 celebrations, because it's not just Lower Town's market, it really is Ottawa's market and Canada's market. As you know, I'm from Lower Town, and we've been struggling with King Edward Avenue. It's turned our community into a traffic sewer for years. We've suffered several deaths and injuries, over 65 injuries on that street alone in the last decade. And today we remember Yvonne Hendricks, a young woman who was killed walking to work on Rideau and Waller in 2014. But we also remember others from other parts of the city. Laurie Strano was killed in cycling Ride the Rideau, February 6th of 2014. And we remember an 80-year-old woman killed as she was hit by a vehicle on Woodruff and Lincoln Heights, whose name I couldn't find, October 15th, 2013. And none of these people were engaged in any dangerous behavior. They were walking to work. They were participating in a cycling event. They shouldn't be collateral damage on our streets. So the communities I'm representing here today want our children to be able to walk safely to school. We want our parents to be able to walk to the shop and not worry about crossing the street. And we want our grandparents to go to the senior center for a class without being fear of being struck by a truck. And we want people to cycle to work without feeling they're taking their lives in their hands. And we want wheelchair users to move safely without barriers in all seasons. We want affordable, safe alternatives to depending on our cars, which means public transportation that meets all of our needs. And what this report shows is that the city hasn't been taking our safety and our needs and our concerns into consideration in the past when designing our streets. And those who care about these issues haven't been represented in the way traffic engineers have designed the streets. And as a result, our roads have become speedways, and our children haven't been safe on our streets, and our cyclists aren't comfortable cycling to work. But it doesn't provide us with what we need in our communities. But today is a new day. This proposal is a good one. It moves us in the right direction. It demonstrates the city is ready to incorporate the interests of pedestrians, cyclists, and public transit users and wheelchair users. It's only a first step, but it's a good first step. And there should be no question that the communities represented by those signing on to the letter care deeply about this issue. And it is the quality of our neighborhoods that's at stake. The streets are places for us and not thoroughfares for cars and trucks. So ultimately it is about the safety of our children, our parents, and our grandparents, and the health of our communities. And we've really waited too long for the city to include the interests of pedestrians and cyclists and wheelchair users. But we do congratulate you on this important step. It is a good plan, and the time has come. We know under this plan, not every single street will be built in the same way. Different streets serve different purposes, but for us, our streets are the backbone of our communities, our neighborhoods. They're our homes and where we gather together and where we move about. And that's why we're here today, and that's why we care so deeply that we collected information from communities across the city about what improvements they wanted to see now in some dangerous intersections or some missing link in a bike path or a bike path. So we have worked very hard. Volunteers took time to conduct active transportation audits. I have reports of several, if you are interested. Lowertown, Centertown has done 3, and Bronson Reconstruction, where people walked around the communities identifying obstacles to safety. In addition, others have conducted street catalogs. So please see us as your partners. We have valuable information to make this work. And we know that working with you and the city staff, we can indeed save lives. We can enable us to walk to school safely, our kids to walk to school safely, and us to cycle safely to work, and wheelchair users to get safely to a seniors class. We want a city council that builds streets as if these things matter, because they matter to us in our communities. The proposal moves us in the right direction, and we want kids, last
7 minutes now, so.
City Council to fully support it and to fully fund it. Thank you.
And thank you for sharing your concern that I think all the councillors around this table share, and all the councillors in council chamber about the safety of our citizens. And I share your view that this report is going to allow us to work effectively with communities to address those concerns. And so thank you for that. It's an evolutionary process, and this is just another tool in our toolbox to continue to do what we know we have to do, which is to keep our citizens safe. Angela Keller-Herzog from the Glebe Community Association, along with Wendy Hunter from the Dalhousie Community Association. Good morning, ladies. You have 5 minutes. Thank you. Oh, sorry, yes. Yeah, 10 minutes, yes. Thank you.
Association, the Dalhousie Community Association, and the Centertown Citizens Community Association. My name is Wendy Hunter, and I'm representing the Dalhousie Community Association. Many people living in our represented communities, which are downtown neighborhoods, walk and cycle to work, to shop, and for recreation. We are looking forward to having complete street projects in our neighborhoods soon, which will improve these activities. In reviewing the implementation framework, however, concern arises over the lack of information and importance given to trees in making streets safe and comfortable for users. Tall shade trees are an essential component of complete streets and should not be considered merely as an enhancement or solely for beautification. Trees are usually an afterthought in street planning in Ottawa, with the consequence that the survival rate of trees on our streets is very poor. In this implementation framework, we would like to see greater emphasis placed on integrating planning, whereby the requirements for growing tall trees are scoped and planned in cooperation and coordination with scoping and planning for utilities and hard infrastructure. Angela Keller-Herzog from the Glebe Community Association will take you through a short presentation on why and how we could improve the profile of trees in the Complete Streets implementation framework. Bonnie Mabey from the Centertown Citizens Community Association will follow later in the agenda with some additional observations. Angela?
Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for making time for us as well. Okay, so left mouse button makes it go down. Great. So first of all, let me say that all 3 of the community associations behind this presentation, we're very, very pleased to see Complete Streets policy come to fruition, and we're very, very pleased to see this implementation plan, which I'm sure you all have in front of you and have read closely. It is a document that allows us to move forward and also to have traction, so we know what the steps are going to be to make this vision come true. Now, they say that a picture is worth 1,000 words, and which is really why we thought it was a good idea to prepare a PowerPoint. So it's our understanding that Complete Streets will contribute to vibrant and livable communities. So this picture for me gives some depiction of multimodal use of the street life, sharing of space. You can see that it's not necessarily a huge suburban situation, but it is an inner urban situation, such as the one that the three community associations are facing. This is not Ottawa, I should well, you probably realize that. This picture here I thought was a good picture to also reflect part of the definition of complete streets, where we want to allow a street to offer safety, comfort, and mobility for all users. Now, this picture we're looking at here is from Toronto, and you can obviously see that there's quite a lot of new trees that have been planted there on Bloor Street. So what we did, because we are enthusiastic about complete streets, is we read this implementation framework quite closely, and we actually were quite shocked because we found that there was a glaring omission. With the exception of the iconography, which is this nice picture here, there's absolutely pretty much no mention of the role of trees, particularly tall trees, in providing safety, comfort, etc. in complete streets. And this is of great concern to us. Now, I was told that I needed to have a slide that explains the benefits of trees. And I think all of us have heard various presentations giving all the multidimensional benefits of trees. Let me just say that and there is a list there on the slide. When I left to come here this morning, my daughter was asking me, "What are you doing today, Mom?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to be giving a presentation in City Council about the importance of trees in the street planning." And she said to me, "Well, Mom, just remember to tell them that trees make us happy." So that kind of sums it up too. So we're concerned. This picture here, which interestingly enough was part of Colin's presentation, is from Churchill Avenue. And you can kind of see that it looks like sort of variegated sections of pavement and concrete, which is very useful if I'm zipping along on my bicycle, but it's not the same picture as that vibrant, verdant, shaded, complete street that we had pictures of before. Further, this is a picture from Bank Street, and this is one of the many dead trees on Bank Street. Some of these trees have been replanted too, and now we're going into third generation within 2 years. So the approach where the road infrastructure and utilities are understood as having this legal right-of-way, and I understand there's provincial legislation, and then the trees are some kind of a cosmetic afterthought. This is not working. The street trees are we're losing the capacity to have adequate space and healthy nutrient and moisture environment for the growth of our trees, and they're dying as a result. The problem is principally underground, it's obvious once you understand it. The trees need space and water and soil underground, and if this is not planned in, then they don't survive. Other cities in Ontario do have guidelines for observing these underground soil volume requirements, and we don't have such a thing in Ottawa. So our argument is that it is smarter and more cost-effective to think of trees as green utilities and to integrate the planning for gray infrastructure and green infrastructure. And there is a very strong cost argument. I haven't done the number of analysis, but I've heard that in terms of retrofitting for a single Silvicell tree in Centertown, that costs you $1,000. If you were to plan these in when you're planning the complete street, then it basically is integrated into the planning process. Plus, there's all these other benefits. So I think that once you start doing the multiplication in terms of thousands of trees, we're talking about tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars in terms of this integration. Now, we don't want to slow down the momentum of the implementation of complete streets. This is not our intent. So we have some very specific recommendations that are listed here in terms of how the document, in terms of the implementation framework, might be amended. We have 6 very specific amendments. We think they're all commonsensical and straightforward. So, for example, in section 3.4, which talks about the administrative structure, we should include forestry services. We should not just be including various parts of planning and infrastructure. This makes perfect sense. And from there on, I don't want to walk through each of these. Of course, the stovepipe structure is efficient, but the whole point of complete streets is to work in a horizontal context. And we think that including a recommendation for balancing space requirements of utilities and trees in planning the underground road sections is absolutely key. And another element of horizontality to incorporate stormwater absorption rate calculations in the planning of streets. As we know, retrofits in terms of sewage and water and stormwater runoff are hugely expensive. So our recommendation is in the project scoping also to explicitly include trees in green space and also to name trees as a design element in Exhibit 4.2. So these are all very specific amendments that could be done to the text in probably half an hour. The rationale is obvious, so we're not trying to slow down complete streets, but we are trying to save us from a pretty costly mistake that would be caused by this omission. And we also feel that correcting this omission of trees in terms of the implementation of complete streets is actually a brilliant opportunity to do much better in creating complete streets and a comfortable, healthy, livable city. So we would urge you to make the recommended changes in the complete streets implementation framework. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. One thing I can say, I'll certainly make sure that your PowerPoint is shared with David Barkley, our Chief Forester, and make sure that he's aware of what you presented here today. And I think Colin has a comment to make, and then I don't know if we'll find out if there's any committee members that want to comment or question. Colin.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to point out that the implementation strategy before you today does recognize the importance of trees and bioswales and green infrastructure. That's described on page 5 of the guideline, and it also recognizes we have a number of urban design guidelines that already exist, including our greening of our transportation corridors and the importance of our urban tree strategy to all work together in implementing streets. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Are there any questions or comments from committee members? No, we'll wait for staff until all the delegations. This is just for the delegation. Yes, Councillor Moffat.
I may have missed it in the presentation. Oh, wait. I'm just about to ask you a question.
Yeah.
Good. In your presentation, you had those pictures. I can't remember if you said where they were from, the ones that they obviously weren't Ottawa. Where were they from?
Sorry, the ones in Ottawa?
Pictures, no, the ones that weren't in Ottawa. The ones that showed that you were showing the treescaping along the complete streets.
There was one from Europe, I think from France, and there was one from San Francisco.
Okay.
The benefit of trees, there was one from Westboro and one from San Francisco. And then the earlier one there was one from Europe and then Bloor Street in Toronto.
Okay. Thanks. I just was curious because I know that some of the challenges we have here have to do with winter maintenance. A great example, if you ever get out to Barrhaven, is Longfields Drive. We've widened it out. It's a beautiful wide boulevard. We've put trees in the median, trees on the sides between the sidewalk and the road, and half the trees are dead because of winter maintenance, because of the salt that we use on the road. So, I mean, I'm sure that's another issue, but ultimately that is one of the factors that we do have to take into consideration that does impact our ability to plant trees. It's not that we can't do it in some situations, just that there are those negative impacts that we do see as well in our climate.
Any other questions from the delegation? Or comments? No. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And our next delegation is Steve Harris, who's appearing on his own behalf.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a short presentation in support of Complete Streets, but also to extend the concept a little bit to some concerns that I have. And the focus of the Complete Streets that is in the framework right now is very much on the built environment, but there's more to a Complete Street than just the built environment. So we must support these complete streets because, as the chair said, they are safer, as they can be more pleasant, and they're more inclusive to everybody. And who doesn't want that? But there's more to it. What is the sound of a complete street? And if you look at typical sound levels and ranges that are in the environment, from the lowest sound level, about 10 dB, which you can basically not even hear, to the very high hundreds, which is a gunshot or a jet plane. Well, if you look at the sweet spot for cities, it should be around 70 to 74 dB, which is, relatively busy traffic, equivalent to being in a restaurant, or even, a train in the distance is about that level. But what I've done here is I went out and I measured what the sound levels were on the streets. And I spent 2 20-minute sessions before lunch, each on a weekday at Bank Street and 3rd Avenue. And in my first session, there were 28 large trucks that went by in 20 minutes, with dB levels mostly over 80, sometimes over 90. The second session, there were 21 trucks in 20 minutes, and there was a dB level up to 99.7, which is in the range of extremely uncomfortable. And talking to residents, people I know, everybody is saying, well, I can't hold a conversation on our main streets anymore. And this doesn't just apply to Bank Street. This is the one I chose, but I've experienced the same things on Preston Street, on the patios, walking down Rideau Street. So the sound levels are just not acceptable on the streets, and largely due to the noise that's generated not just by the traffic, but it's by acceleration and braking that where the noise levels are coming from. So I think there's a whole lot of education that needs to be done in the concept of complete streets, and I think a lot of the people, because of the pressures in modern day society, are treating the streets almost like racetracks, because they got to get from A to B as soon as possible, so they're stepping on the gas and then braking when they hit the lights or traffic. And we've got to go from a model that they're trying to race these trucks to more of a smaller, more suitable delivery model in case of, for example, FedEx in the U.S. has gone to electric trucks. So, and the other thing is enforcement. Other cities are moving much more ahead in terms of their noise reduction. They're way ahead of Ottawa, even in terms of lowering the sound of sirens in emergency vehicles. The current bylaw, it says that the vehicle is not allowed to be more than 5 dB above idle, and I've never seen that enforced anywhere. So please use spot enforcement campaign and education on our vulnerable main streets as part of this Complete Street campaign. Thank you very much.
And thank you. Are there any questions for the delegation? Seeing none, I will call our next delegation, which is Graham Saul. Graham is here on behalf of Ecology Ottawa. Morning, Graham. You have 5 minutes.
Thanks very much. So this has been a really interesting process, and I personally have learned a lot within the context of it. I wasn't familiar going in about the idea that 50 years ago we adopted this concept of level of service, and we created a specific formula for traffic engineers to use when assessing a road, and that formula pretty much only looked at cars. Didn't include pedestrians, didn't include cyclists, didn't include public transit, didn't include issues related to disability and comfort in terms of street use. And so I guess, to me, as I went through it, that explained a fair amount, right? Like if you hand a traffic engineer a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail. And if you ask them to only assess cars, every road begins to look like a highway over time. And we've been basically, over the course of the past 50 years, systematically underrepresenting very important constituencies of people who use the street on a day-to-day basis. And so it's almost kind of self-evident when we see a multimodal system put forward. It's almost surprisingly simple and obvious that when we look at and when we ask our traffic engineers to assess a given street, that we're giving them criteria that they can use not just to assess traffic delays from a car perspective, but also the interests of pedestrians and cyclists and public transit users and people of all ages and abilities. But it's actually historically in North America not self-evident that we would do so. And so the first and most important thing I want to say is congratulations to the Transportation Committee and to the city for not only adopting a policy in 2013 within the context of your transportation master plan that says we're going to adopt a complete streets policy, and the objective of this is going to be to design our streets as though all users' ages and abilities are important, but to then actually go and take the time to think about what that means in practice. As the report says, there's over 700 municipalities across North America that have adopted this basic principle because it is so self-evident and makes so much sense. But Ottawa is one of the cities that has brought forward an implementation framework that actually tries to translate it into practice. And it's good to see the city making a commitment to its residents and then putting forward a thoughtful plan to follow through on those commitments. I would like to see us moving, and I think this does take us in the right direction, from a system that's narrowly obsessed about moving cars. We're always going to be concerned about moving cars, right? That's not going anywhere. There's no question. It has to be part of the equation. But moving from a system that's narrowly obsessed about moving cars to a system that focuses on moving people, and moving from a system that sees our streets as essentially roadways to a system that sees our streets as places, as destinations, as places where we live and as neighborhoods that serve multiple different actors. At the end of the day, this is about, as other people have said, making it safer for our kids to walk to school. It's about helping people with physical disabilities get around town, helping our aging population move around safely, helping cyclists ride to work without feeling like they're taking their life into their own hands, helping more people get around faster on public transportation, and quite frankly, helping manage traffic congestion. Because if you want to manage traffic congestion, the secret isn't to just be building more and bigger roads all the time. If that worked, Los Angeles would be a driver's paradise rather than a poster child for road rage and traffic jams. What we need to do is give people real transportation options and help people make the decision to get out of their cars by making it convenient and comfortable for them to do so. And this policy helps move us in that direction. I do want to, we have seen quite clearly that this is something that our supporters care deeply about. The active transportation audits that the Lowertown president referred to earlier are very, very popular amongst our constituents in terms of working on concrete local level. The letter from the community associations, I think, speaks volumes about the amount of support there is for this. And we conducted a walkability audit on Sherbourne Road about 3 weeks ago, and 50 people from the community came out to wander around Sherbourne Road and to think about how to make it easier for their kids to walk to school. And they live in a community where they're now being told their kids have to walk to school more easily, more often, because of other kinds of cuts. So it's clearly an issue people care about. I think there are two considerations that I would ask you to keep in mind as you move forward immediately. And one is that this isn't just about tearing up streets and putting them back together again. A lot of the most important changes is just about slapping down some paint onto a road and making it clear where different boundaries lie. So the implementation of the Complete Streets framework represents a thoughtful move in the right direction, but Finally, I do agree that there is a collision going on between the Green Streets agenda and the Complete Streets agenda. There's some very interesting work being done in the Environment Committee around green infrastructure and green streets, and I think the Transportation Committee should spend some time talking to the Environment Committee about how those two can come together better. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your presentation and also your contribution as one of the group as a stakeholder. Are there any questions or comments for the delegation? Councillor Kakish.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for the presentation. Can you just follow up a bit more on that conflict that you talk about between the environment and the transportation? I'm not sure what you're referring to there.
So we've only got so much space on a streetscape, right? And there's all kinds of competition for how we're going to use that space. The water people, the hydro people, the sidewalks, we want wide sidewalks. In some cases, we want bike lanes. In some cases, we want more traffic lanes. And we want a street that is actually going to be a neighborhood, a comfortable green space. We want trees. People care deeply about trees, and what we've been doing, more or less, is strangling them by putting them in places where we know the root structure after about 20 years will force them to die. And so you have these conversations, and we've seen it in the Building Better Suburbs conversation as well, where different users want to make sure that they have space to meet their needs. And so as we talk about green infrastructure, which is about how do we move from impermeable surfaces to more things like trees and bioswales and permeable surfaces that can help avoid flooding and improve our city, and help reduce the cost of sewage infrastructure as well. So as we move towards talking about the value of green infrastructure from an infrastructure perspective, we're going to have to accommodate that by making sure there's space on the streetscape for trees and green space. And so we're having one conversation about making sure there's space for all modes of transportation, and we're having another conversation about making sure there's space for green space. And those conversations are both valuable, and they have to be reconciled in the same way that they have to be reconciled with hydro, who wants space as well, for instance.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much, Graham.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is going to be Bonnie Mabey from Centertown Community Association.
Thank you very much. Obviously, I'm a neophyte here. I apologize. This was a last-minute request from the Trees and Green Space Committee chairperson for me to do this as he's up in the Arctic, not experiencing many trees, I'm sure. But what I'm going to do, because I want to make sure that this is the part I reach, is to first of all say that the Trees and Green Space Committee and the Centertown Citizens Association is totally in favor of complete streets. There's no question of that. But the devil is in the details, isn't it? And trees are one of our big impetuses, and we want to make sure that these are, as so many people have already mentioned, incorporated into the design. Let me read you my finish, and then I'll go back to the beginning. For 20 years, I have worked with Trees and Green Space Committee, and yet in the framework, there is just not enough attention paid to trees and to green space. At one point, I have said in my presentation that I am looking forward to the increased cycling and walking, because then perhaps we will do away with some of our surface parking lots. Wouldn't it be marvelous if those, some of them anyway, became green spaces? And that's one of the goals that we would like to see happen. Trees, including mature trees, are crucial, as presented by Martha Copestake, a forester with the Planning Department, in her presentation just 2 weeks ago about the Urban Forest Management Plan. How many people on the Traffic Committee have heard about the Urban Forest Management Plan? And that's one of my things, is to make sure that the integration is there amongst council. And I'm quoting her here, one of the City Council's strategic initiatives, this urban forest management plan will provide a structured approach to protecting and enhancing the environmental, social, and I have added health and economical services provided by trees, or even more so, the urban forest. And these are my words. Ottawa has many policies, programs, initiatives, and regulations related to trees. However, there is no overarching long-term vision and plan for our urban trees. Canada's capital city has an opportunity to become a leader in reinforcing the value of these green assets. Very important. I think we depend on NCC too much for that. Trees, so maybe members of the planning department can get together with the urban forest strategy and the Complete Streets framework to enhance the forest canopy as they plan for complete streets. Trees are essential. Careful planning of infrastructure, well, I guess you've heard this, haven't you already, to allow for this is crucial. Walking in all seasons is also essential. And yet the amount of surface infrastructure that impedes plowing sidewalks seems to be increasing. I am a little concerned because in the framework I read of a large number of policies, departments, and branches that may be considered to somewhat impede the goal of complete streets. Some are mandated, but there are a huge number of layers that may seem to put some slight barriers to the implementation of the broad and laudable vision which you all have. I want you to see complete streets as pure opportunity. Political will, creative thinking, and integration of departments are needed more than policy to achieve green, complete streets. You can do it. I'm counting on you, and so are the citizens of Ottawa. Have I got more time? No.
Very little. You've got 22 seconds.
I've got 23 seconds. Just to let you know, I've had an extreme amount of experience in cycling and walking throughout the States and Canada. We take our bikes everywhere we go. And recently in Calgary, if you want to see complete streets, especially great bicycle lanes, they even have little bicycle green or red lights for the bicycle lanes. Check it out. Thank you very much, and go with it.
Thank you. Any questions? Don't leave yet. Are there any questions for the delegation? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next delegate is Nancy Biggs, who I believe is appearing on her own behalf this morning. Welcome. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you for your attention. I'm a long-time resident of Orleans, almost 30 years now, and I'd like to speak about Complete Streets. In the Complete Streets implementation framework, it was noticed that the Complete Street project addresses the Term of Council priorities, strategic initiatives TM2 and TM4. TM2 provides and promotes infrastructure to support safe mobility choices, and TM4 improves safety for all road users. I would encourage Council to follow through with the strategic initiatives goal to complete 100% of the Phase 1 Transportation Master Plan cycling projects by Q4 2018, committing $2 million per year for cycling and $1 million per year for pedestrians. In Orleans, Councillor Manette was instrumental in having a multi-purpose path paved from 10th line to Hiawatha Park. This has greatly improved cycling and is extremely well used. Councillor Blais has proposed a Trans-Orleans cycling pedestrian pathway linking Trim Road to Navan Road, which will connect the community and act as a backbone for a larger network through Orleans and Cumberland. He said, quote, "It will allow residents of all ages to safely travel to and from many destinations, not having to use a car." The city has started construction making Main Street a complete street. It would be wonderful to have a complete street outside of the Greenbelt in the suburb of Orleans on Centrum Boulevard, starting at the Quality Inn next to 10th line, linking Eric Kapnick's Way with Centrum Boulevard, going past the police station, the Cumberland Seniors Park, the YMCA, government offices, Schenkman Arts Centers, restaurants, and 2 hotels, ending at Place d'Orleans, the future site of an LRT station. With the current intensification that's taken place in this area, a complete street will make it safe for all ages, whether walking or cycling. We need to make Ottawa a more environmentally sustainable city. I felt truly inspired by Vancouver's Deputy Mayor, Andrea Wiener. She discussed Vancouver's goal to be the greenest city in the world by 2020 and is well on the way, now ranking 4th. Vancouver's council had a vision for a better place to work and live sustainably and started implementing 84 environmental improvements even before they had an official greening plan, and engaged thousands of Vancouverites. As you can see, Ottawa is totally engaged in the Complete Streets program. What does it take? Change needs real leadership. It needs quantifiable outcomes, and it needs action. Ottawa has to cycle and walk the talk, starting now. Andrea Wheeler was moved to tears at the end of her talk when she spoke about the 22 million people who have already been displaced, not by war, but by climate change. I agree with her, it is a moral imperative, and that we must act now to make our cities more sustainable. David Chernyshenko at this event said, "There's no reason why we could not or should not be doing everything that Vancouver is doing," and I agree with him. Thank you.
Thank you for coming down and sharing your thoughts. Are there any questions or comments for the delegation? Okay, thank you very much. Our next delegation is Ron Rose, and Ron is here on behalf of the Old Ottawa East Community Association. And Ron, I don't know if you were here earlier, but your counselor should have been here today, but he fell ill. So, but we'll tell him you were here and you had good things to say.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for perhaps putting words in my mouth. Just to remind members of the council, the community of Old Ottawa East is located between the Rideau Canal and the Rideau River and lies just east of Lansdowne Park. To begin with, Mr. Chairman, we would like once again to express our thanks to the committee and to council for the decision to reconstruct Main Street, which is the backbone of our community, as a complete street. Our street is in the midst of a massive reconstruction right now, but we are confident that enduring the chaos will be worth it when the project is completed in 2017. It is because we are one of the first communities to construct a complete street that we felt it might be appropriate to address you today and share our experience. First of all, it takes a lot of consultation with the community to get it right. There were almost monthly meetings with the Community Advisory Group and 3 separate public open houses, all of which served to determine what the community wanted to achieve with their new street. We, as a community, have been very impressed with the way city staff, Colin and his people, have listened to our concerns and responded in a thoughtful and considerate way. We still have some concerns, but the obstacles are, in many cases, caused by physical and fiscal constraints, rather than by a lack of responsiveness by city staff. A street should, above all, belong to and reflect the community in which it is located. Main Street was the core of our community before the construction of the McElwraith Bridge in 1964 turned it into a thoroughfare, serving to move cars from Alta Vista and the growing southern developments into downtown. The street then was safe for pedestrians and cyclists, traffic was reasonable, and businesses thrived. Our desire has been to recreate that sense of a livable community where the main street serves to unite rather than to divide, while still accommodating a reasonable amount of commuter traffic. We note that staff has tried to come up with a definition of a complete street. For Old Ottawa East, which granted is in an urban area, a complete street is one that is well lit, includes wide, even, and safe sidewalks for pedestrians, including those in strollers and carriages, smooth, flat, safe, and segregated paths for cyclists, and safe streets with ample parking and allowance for safe turns. It should have an attractive streetscape and not be contaminated by unsightly overhead utility wires. This, Mr. Chairman, brings us to our one recommendation. The current policy of the City of Ottawa for undergrounding utility wires is that the city will not pay the cost of undergrounding utility wires when streets are being reconstructed. We strongly urge this committee to recommend to Council a reconsideration of this policy. Considerable efforts go into creating an attractive streetscape, and these efforts are negated by the presence of unsightly overhead utility wires. One final observation, Mr. Chairman. Complete streets should be an integral part of the city's overall transportation planning. They reflect the growing realization that streets should move people within their communities, not just between communities or between homes and offices. This committee and Council should redouble your efforts to develop efficient ways of moving large numbers of people within the city. Investments must continue to be made in LRT, in transit, and active transportation infrastructure within the city, and not on additional highway capacity to bring even more cars into an already clogged downtown. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rose, for your comments and your support for the LRT and various other projects we have ongoing. Appreciate it. Are there any questions or comments for the delegation? Thank you. We have our last delegation, which is Mr. Espoir Maniarambona. And you have 5 minutes, sir. Welcome.
All right. Wow, these are comfy. So I'm really grateful to be here, to be given this opportunity to speak to you today. I support the Complete Streets implementation framework. I want to echo a lot of things that were mentioned. Definitely support for more trees. I really enjoy stillness. I enjoy being able to breathe clean air. I enjoy not having my asthma act up because, a car's emissions are messing up with my oxygen. I know some of you in this room love your cars, and that's okay, but consider perhaps that your love of your car is killing people. Some cars literally kill people in the city. That's already been mentioned. Polluting the air. We know this, just walking down any street. I live in Heron Park, just near Heron and Bank, and that's a busy area. Racetrack has been mentioned earlier, and that's precisely the way I feel sometimes, especially at night, down on Bank Street in between Billingsbridge and Heron and Bank, it's like a racetrack, and it's like, where's the police? Where's who's enforcing this? Is this NASCAR all of a sudden? You know, I'm trying to sleep. So I definitely support the Complete Streets implementation framework, but I'd want us to go further. You know, I dream. You know, walking down the street. I'm a pedestrian. I got my bike stolen, so I don't cycle anymore. I walk down the street, and I dream. I have recurring dreams, visions of stillness. You know, just more trees, less cars, no cars even. People walking, people biking. You know, there's less noise. You know, it feels good. That feels very good. It raises the vibration. People feel good as a result, and that's what I want. And yeah, and that's a vision I think many Ottawans have. Many people that aren't in this room, you know, that are struggling to get to work, struggling to get to school. And, you know, a friend of mine, a spiritual friend of mine, very sensitive to different energies, made a really good point about cars. You know, I don't want to hate on cars. You know, I know people need to get from Barhaven to Orleans for whatever reason in less than an hour, but sometimes cars feel like demonic entities. You know, I mean, it's scary trying to walk down the street sometimes. I know if you're in a car, you're listening to your radio, you don't notice that, but if you're a pedestrian, it's like almost like a war zone. I'm just trying to walk across the street, and I'm having existential moments. Like, am I actually going to survive crossing over the street? You know, this car trying to pass down the intersection is telling me to hurry up. You know, or anyways, there's a lot of very negative vibes on the streets. I'd feel more comfortable if we did have more complete streets, prioritizing pedestrians, prioritizing cycling, public transit as well. One thing I wanted to mention that has been mentioned is the fact that I feel that as long as we have very high OC Transpo fares, that are some of the highest in Canada apparently, some of the highest in the world, I feel that our streets would be incomplete, because streets are supposed to have people, you know, moving from A to B, but if these people can't even afford to get from A to B because the fares are too high, then I feel that's unacceptable. So I don't know if it's in the mandate of this particular committee, but it would be nice to also consider eliminating transit fares, to having free transit, just like many cities across the globe are doing. So I'm very grateful to be given this opportunity. And I want us to consider, again, just having this vision of what kind of spaces do we want, you know, because for me it's not just about street, it's about space, and learning from our Indigenous brothers and sisters who lived on this land for thousands of years and are still living here, how they were able to live comfortably, you know, in peace and harmony with the land, without cars. You know, like sometimes we forget that cars is a recent phenomenon, and I dream of a world without cars, and just like Daenerys Targaryens, I'm grateful that my dreams come true, and so I want you to support this Complete Streets framework, but also you know, engaging us in the process and democratizing our spaces and making us the deciders. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Don't leave yet. There may be a question or a comment.
Okay, cool.
Any questions for the delegation? Okay, thank you so much for coming down.
Thank you. Much gratitude.
So that's our final delegation. So we'll now move to the vote on this subject, and I think, looking to the clerk, we need to vote on the motion, the amendment from Councillor McKinney first, which was to have a report brought back in Q4 2016.
Just a quick comment.
To speak to the what we've done in 2016 and what we're looking forward in 2017. And Councillor Fourie has a quick comment before we go to the vote on the motion.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président. J'ai un commentaire parce que j'ai aimé le ton des discussions qui ont été soumises, mais je pense que c'est important aussi de faire un reflet sur les 4 dernières années. Il y a eu beaucoup d'efforts de la part du comité les 4 dernières années avec les membres du conseil qui étaient ici, de mettre de l'avant avec la revue du plan de transport, avec la revue du plan de cyclisme, avec la revue du plan des piétons, tous ces éléments-là pour nous rendre où on est aujourd'hui. Je suis heureux de voir que la communauté est active, soulève tout de même, continue à soulever des enjeux qui sont pertinents. Pour nous, c'est vraiment un changement de volet au niveau des rues complètes. Ce que je sais, c'est qu'il y a 4 ans, on ne parlait pas des rues complètes. C'était un thème qui n'était pas connu par l'ensemble des communautés. Puis aujourd'hui, au contraire, les rues complètes, ça veut dire quelque chose. Ça veut dire quelque chose pour les communautés. Les gens sont activés, les gens en demandent. Alors, il y a eu vraiment un changement à ce niveau-là, une forme d'éducation collective qui nous a rendu où on est aujourd'hui. Je vois le rapport d'un bel œil. Ça va amener encore des défis entre les rues qu'on va refaire et qu'est-ce qu'on fait avec les rues qui sont déjà refaites, comment on s'ajuste avec ça. Alors, il va toujours y avoir certains défis à ce niveau-là, mais honnêtement, des discussions qu'on a eues il y a 4 ans, au rapport qu'on a aujourd'hui à la participation communautaire, on s'en va dans la bonne direction. Puis ça, je pense qu'en tant que communauté, en tant que ville, on doit être fiers de ça. Merci.
Comments. I want to thank Councillor Caudry, who pointed out that I haven't given anybody an opportunity to ask staff questions. So I'm assuming Councillor Caudry has a question for staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and yes, I do. The question relates to what happened at the advisory committee last month regarding this project. The advisory committee, in their wisdom, thought not to pass or not to accept this project going forward until they've had some comments included in the project. And I discussed that with Mr. Simpson, and I think Mr. Simpson has an opportunity to provide a clarification for that question.
Thank you, Councillor, and through the chair, it was a pleasure working with the Accessibility Advisory Committee, and we did incorporate their comments. Barrier-free was suggested by them as part of the complete street definition, and that's been added, and we're looking forward to continuing to work with the Accessibility Advisory Committee as a follow-up to this motion to report back in Q4. We'll again meet with the AAC to go through as a follow-up not only what lies ahead, but how we can make improvements.
Thank you very much, Mr. Simpson, for the clarification. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor McKenney.
Thank you, Chair. It's been a great morning. The comments today really do reflect what so many people that I talk to, that we talk to in our neighborhoods, think about in terms of our space and how we're, as a city, starting to reallocate that space back, taking it back from, wide roads. You take all of the north-south streets in my neighborhood, Kent, Metcalf, Lyon, O'Connor, they were turned into highways in the 50s, and at the expense of sidewalks and trees, as a matter of fact. So to be here today talking about, seriously implementing a complete streets framework where we're looking at the levels of service for all users is really quite an accomplishment. And I thank everyone who came out today. I could have listened to comments all day long. A couple of things, though, that I just wanted to address in terms of existing. So it's one thing to wait until we have a complete renewal of a street, but if you take a street like Rochester in my ward, it is a prime candidate for a complete street, but it likely won't be renewed for another 15 to 20 years. So, we can move towards complete streets with small modifications. Rochester would be easy, really, to put down a lane of green paint and let people cycle on what could be a partially segregated lane. So, just want to hear from staff what options are available for us to move towards complete streets. And our SIs around that we have in our office budgets for traffic safety is helping us do that incrementally. But anytime we, change a light standard, we can move that intersection closer to a complete street. So I just want to hear about that. And the other thing is trees. Again, that was a result of taking over the streets in the 50s and 60s was one of the things that we took away was trees. And I know that for myself in the downtown, for me to plant a tree that will have a good chance of survival in silver soil cells can be upwards of $100,000 per tree is what I've been quoted. So we can't do that, or we can, but not very often. That's a pretty expensive tree. So I think it is, I am looking at page 5 in the guidelines, and it doesn't really give any teeth to how we will design our complete streets and make sure that we're, because what happens is it's the requirements for the utilities. If you go in afterwards and put in a tree, all those utilities are already there. So to move those utilities around, to get the permission to do so, and then to move them around is enormously costly. So I would like to see the recommendations that were brought by the 3 community associations. I think that they are not onerous. I think that they are just asking us to balance those requirements, to take that into account, and it does give, it would give us, moving forward, certainly a better plan than what is just in the guidelines to make sure that trees are a part of the complete street. I'll say this, I love Churchill, but I was struck by the fact that there was a lot of pavement when I was cycling down there the first time I did. So if I could just ask you what that would take and give a direction so that comes back, these recommendations come back before it comes to council.
Colin, before you jump in there, I'm just looking to legal. A change of that sort to the actual recommendations of the report, is that a direction or will we need a motion? I'm also a little concerned, frankly, about we don't have a sense of what that might cost in front of us to determine that today.
Yeah, well, I would subject staff's comments on this as what would take in investigating that, but if there is a financial impact, it would require a motion.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Mr. Chair, I'll try to address the answers in sequence. The first question was how we deal with existing issues rather than waiting for full reconstruction projects. And the framework does suggest that every transportation project is a way to implement complete street elements, and certainly a full reconstruction project provides the greatest flexibility for that. But there's a lot of other smaller jobs, such as a line painting job that could include some high visibility paint that would include the improved conditions where warranted. So there's a lot of other operational planning programs at the city, not just the reconstruction, but we have an area traffic management program, we have a traffic safety program, we have an intersection modification program, we have our development review application processes for roadworks to support applications. So there's a lot of other mechanisms that the framework would be applied to rather than just implementation or just reconstruction projects. Second question was dealing with trees, and on page 5, as I noted, that the framework does recognize the importance of green infrastructure and bioswales, and we are working in collaboration with our staff from the Environmental Services Department, and we are looking at candidate streets for green complete streets to pilot some of these pilot bioswales as part of the Complete Street Initiative. But know that this implementation framework is really process driven. We have a lot of urban design guidelines and a lot of standards in place that really specify how to go about planting trees and where they need to be positioned and all of the factors that go into making a street healthy. And really the focus of this complete street implementation framework is more process. Like how and when, or more when and under what conditions should you be doing that? And then we would lean on the existing design guidelines, such as our greening of transportation corridor guidelines that goes into a lot of detail about salt-resistant plants and where to plant them and what the offset would be. And we work together with our existing technical guidelines to make the whole thing come together. So, I think going forward, we are going to continue to review this whole process and continue to refine the multimodal level of service, and I can see an opportunity for us to look more closely at trees on how to incorporate that into the framework, and then working with our colleagues in environmental services, and I'm hopeful that when we're back here in Q4 of 2016, we'll have these issues worked out and fleshed out more, and we'll be able to identify some successful candidates where we did include street trees and bioretention facilities.
Thank you for that, Colin. I was just wondering, just to follow up quickly, you had helped me draft a response recently to an interested party about complete streets and provided a listing of all the various programs and departments that would allow us to do things ahead of time, if you will. I'm wondering if, when you get a chance, if you could share that list with the members of, well, not only the members of this committee, but all of council, so that they have those resources and those tools to decide how they want to advance projects in their ward. So if you could do that, I think the response I'm thinking of?
I do, and I will. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Sorry, Councillor McKinney again.
Thank you. So I get that, and we're coming back in Q4 2016, but I think that in the interim, and I'll ask legal whether I need just a direction or a motion, and I can't imagine that this will add a cost, but I think at the very least, when we are scoping our projects, that we could include trees and green space in the scoping of projects going forward. I just don't want to lose a year where if we are looking at a complete street coming up that we're going to implement, that we haven't done that. It's really, we can't go backwards all the time with trees. We have to be looking forward. So all this is asking for is that when we have a project coming up and we've planned for it, we put in that project what it means to include green space, whether that's bioswales or the type of greening that we've done on Sunnyside, which I would love to see, and trees especially. So maybe ask legal if I can just leave that as a direction, or if I need a motion.
Through the chair, as Colin has stated that in page 5 of the guideline, it does speak to addressing the issue of trees. And so as Colin had outlined just before, your question, Councillor, was they would be looking at that individually and project specific. And so you may want to consider a direction, but it would seem to be redundant since it's already in the guideline. And I don't think a direction would require anything more than to instruct staff to consider that. However, it's already in the guideline.
Except that in the guideline, it just says that this may include specific consideration of street trees. So it's not, it doesn't require us to include that in the scope of a project. It just says we might do it. What I don't want to do is miss a year where we don't do it. It's too important not to have that as part of our scoping. So if I could,
and I appreciate that. Yeah. Again, though, I'm not sure how you can do that without a cost element. If what you're suggesting, I think what you're suggesting is that trees must, as opposed to may, must be considered in the scoping of the project.
That's right.
And every tree we add is X number of dollars. Mm-hmm. And the engineering services to consider those trees. So I think there is a cost element. I see Vivi Chi nodding her head. So I think this has to go by way of, I'm looking to legal again, but they had said earlier if there was a cost element involved that it would require a motion.
Okay.
And if that's the case, I think we want to have some sense of what that costing is. So it's certainly the option is open if you want to follow through with this between now and council, rather, to do that, and that would also give staff an opportunity to figure out what the costing may be, if any. I see Vivi's reaching for the mic, so maybe she can help us with this.
Yes, Chair, there would be definitely a cost because if the right-of-way does not allow for us to include the proper space required to support trees, then that would be a property cost, and there's also operating costs associated with maintaining the tree and the green space as well. But this is something that we do already as part of our work in my team, specifically with environmental assessment studies. We look at the corridor and see where we can fit in green space. As Colin had mentioned, it is in the design guidelines. So, and so we have to look at the projects, each individual one, and the framework requires us to look at all the elements that can fit in there, so that's already built in.
Okay, thank you for that. Are there any other?
Sorry, I will want costing to come back. So here's where I'm going. I disagree. All I'm asking for is whenever we scope a project that we include green space and trees. That can include raised beds, it can include bioswales, it can include a lot of different things. But if we just leave it open that you might come back or you might not, depending on what you think is going to be the cost, then we're going to continue to move forward the way we have. And right now we don't consider trees. Churchill is an example of that. We don't always consider where we're going to be putting our trees or green space. So I would like a costing. I would
Again, Vice Chair, I'm going to interrupt you because I think VBC just indicated, in fact, they do consider trees in every single project. Consider and implementing are two different things. So I don't know that we know that trees were not considered for Churchill, but a decision was made whether because of operationally or cost-wise that it couldn't happen. But I think you've now heard from both Colin and VBC that trees are considered and they will be considered as part of the rollout and the implementation of this program.
Project scoping is not implementing. Am I correct? Do I have my language?
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so I'm not asking for it at time of implementation. I'm saying when we are scoping a project, when we go out to look at a project, we need to consider if we're going to include trees and green space. What I'm saying is the language here on page 5 is not explicit. It doesn't guarantee that we will do that. It says we may do it. What I would like to see in the scoping, not the implementation, but in the scoping of new projects is what does it take to make sure that we have trees and green space.
And I'm looking to Vivi again to help us with that.
Yes, Chair. We do that kind of work in project scoping already. I believe in our...
Councillor, I think we're getting an answer for you from Vivi if we all listen in.
Yeah, no, I'm good. I'm hearing the answer.
Okay, so yes, we do that in our project scoping already. I believe if you look at some of our EA scopes of work that we bring forward to this committee, it itemizes things that we're looking for. Complete streets, I think there's even landscaping mentioned. So that is done, but you're saying to ensure that it be done. So that means
in the scope. To look at the project, when we're scoping the project, are we considering trees and green space? Are we considering landscaping? If we are, I'd like to see where that is done.
Yes, we do. We look at the right-of-way that we have. We look at what we can put in there to be a complete street, including the green space. And so there will be trade-offs, or there will be more costs to the project, depending on which elements we include. So that we have to go through that exercise for each of the projects.
Okay.
Is that satisfactory?
So I would like a costing, because I will consider bringing the motion then to council. Thanks.
I'm just not sure what your motion will be, as it's now been confirmed by staff several times that they already do what you're asking them to do. So what would the nature of your motion be?
She can take it offline to council.
Okay, fair enough. Because I think there's a bit of cross-talking here. I think everybody's doing what you want them to do, but maybe we need to have a larger discussion offline to figure that out. I think staff's been quite clear. Are there any other questions? Yes, Councillor Wilkinson.
Just a couple, Mr. Chair. Some of the photographs you showed they're all two-lane roads, but we have some major arterials that have bike lanes on them, and few adults will use them. Parents won't let their children use them. And on March Road, we had a huge accident with 5 people in the bike lane. What are you doing in those cases to ensure, maybe in the short term, I think what I'm talking about is safety when we're doing these complete streets, the safety considerations that need to be taken into place. And here there needs to be, I know if they don't like rumble strips because they can't get across their bikes, but maybe non-continuous ones, or something needs to be done there, because what we have now is a waste. We've put the money into what the bike lane is not being used. I know somebody commutes to work along there. She's not scared of anything, so she does go on it. But and the other point of it is, of course, they don't plow them in the winter, so she's found she can't use them in the wintertime, so she would. But I think we need to take a look at the safety conditions when we're doing these more than we know now. And I just had a meeting yesterday about a new collector road in my area, and it's a road, and they're going to widen it to have a multi-purpose pathway beside it, and just put a little rumble strip there. And I consider that unsafe. It's for pedestrians. It's at the same level as the road. A car can go right over. Sure, there's a rumble strip, they'll feel it, but that's too late with this kid right there. So I think we have to take a really strong look at and come up with some safety standards in these streets, because we're making more and more of them. And I think it's a learning process, but I just like to make sure that looking at the safety concerns is one of the things you take a look at when you're doing the design and the scoping.
Thank you, Councillor. And through the chair, the proposed MMLOS tool in front of you includes a number of key safety factors built into evaluating risk and safety for cyclists and pedestrians. And as we move up the hierarchy of roads into 4-lane arterial roads, factors like vehicle speed, vehicle volumes, separation distance, those types of factors are factored in. And for a road like March Road, we'll be looking to do more than just the painted bicycle.
The one I saw yesterday is not an arterial, it's a collector, but it's still a heavy use road. And I just didn't feel that the safety considerations were, I sent them back to work on it. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Deans, I believe, is next.
I just want to follow up on what I heard from the people that took the time to come out. I think this has been a great discussion, but I think the message from the public today is loud and clear that a complete street isn't really complete unless it has some green on it as well. And one of the images we saw was Churchill, which was 100% hardscape. And I guess, to me, the question then is, what is the principle that ensures that there's always on a street going to be a landscape component? And I understand maybe it's not going to be trees if they're too expensive, but they could be raised planters, they could be flower beds. But I think the point is that a complete street isn't complete unless it's also a green street. So if that's the principle that we'd like to embody, I don't think that necessarily has to be hugely expensive, but I think that we should be looking for ways in every complete street that we do to have a green component. And that should be in principle embodied in our plan, so that we don't end up with a Churchill with 100% hardscape, which isn't good anyway because the water can't run through. Like we should be
I think, thinking about that. So, the people that said maybe we should be marrying the Environment Committee with the Transportation Committee and looking at this report, I agree with that. I think that we can put these together in a better way, and the principle embedded in this report should be that there will always be a percentage green element in all complete streets moving forward.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments for staff? So I'm going to call the vote on the motion, Vice Chair's motion first. Carried. And then on the report as amended?
Carried.
Carried. Thank you very much. Moving on in the agenda then, we have any notice of motion for consideration of a subsequent meeting? Okay. Any inquiries? Yes, Councillor Fleury.
My traditional inquiry, but this one is very intriguing. It's the following. The Ontario Traffic Manual, Book 18, allows the use of green paint lines along cycling lanes. It's on page 111 of the book. In an effort to better identify and brand cycling lanes, could staff please review the opportunity available in Book 18 to expand the cycling marking options in the toolkit? So the idea here is that the middle lane is yellow, the side lane is, or the separating lanes are white, that the right cycling lane be painted in a green color to signalize to the driver that beside you there's a cycling lane aside from having a white painted line. So that's all I'm asking. We're allowed to in Book 18. We're looking if we can see implementation of that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other inquiries? Councillor Kakish has a motion that he would like us to deal with today because of timing issues. I'll ask Councillor Kakish to introduce the motion so we know what it's about before we decide whether to waive the motion onto this particular agenda.
Thank you very much, Chair. And it is about a Veterans Day and a pilot project for a small radius within the downtown core for consideration of free parking.
Okay.
I'll get into more details, but we need to waive the rules first.
We need to waive the rules. Are we okay with that? All right. So if you can, maybe the motion can be up on screen.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just give a brief background on what this is about. So one of my residents, who's a retired veteran, approached me a few weeks ago and with a request of free parking. So obviously I did some research, spoke with Mr. Wiley's department about it and with staff, and obviously there's a lot of concerns about doing it citywide because of all the various factors and implications with costs and other logistics in terms of enforcement and many more. So as a compromise, we agreed that we'd bring this forward, which basically offers veterans the one day for Remembrance Day, where we know many of our retired vets come downtown for the ceremony, and offers them free parking within the radius of Parliament Hill, as well as the parking downstairs. So staff, in my discussions with them, feel comfortable with this approach, and we'll try it as a pilot project to see what kind of numbers come back. But it is, as I said, a compromise. It's very focused, and it's one day. So in terms of any implications, staff have assured me that they're fine with this approach, and I ask for your support on it.
Thank you very much. Any comments or debate on the motion? Councillor Medic.
Thank you, Chair. Just one point. There are several different license plates of current military members. Mine is my unit crest, and other serving members use these rather than the veterans plates, because until they're retired, some of them don't feel like getting them. So we might want to expand it to include any military logos, which you have to get through the MTO anyway. So just think about that. There's very few of them, but a lot of the guys that are going to be coming down for Remembrance Day will probably have them on their license plates.
So it's your motion, Councillor Kakish. Do you consider that to be a friendly amendment?
Yeah, absolutely.
And is staff still in the room? Kevin?
Yeah, staff would support that.
Okay. Okay. A member of the armed forces or a vet?
Either. Like you can only get, like I got my RCR one because I was RCR. So if a guy's artillery or armored or anything like that, it's because they're a member of that regiment. So they can't, like a family member can't get it, or just a guy off the street can't go in and say,
No, I appreciate that. I guess the question I was asking, Councillor, is that then include all members of the armed forces versus just vets?
Right. It would include anyone coming to Remembrance Day that day. That's a military member / veteran. Because you're considered a veteran after 2 years in uniform. And many guys stay in uniform much further long after 2 years.
Okay, I'm looking to Kevin again. Kevin, now that we have that clarification, are staff still okay with that?
Yes, staff still in support, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to know we're all on the same page here. Councillor Kadri.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And yeah, I will be supporting the motion, but I do have a question of staff. Have we looked at the cost of this program going forward? And if so, what would that cost be?
To the Chair, we haven't been able to get an estimated cost because we don't know what the uptake is, so that is part of the reason for the one-year pilot. We'll get a good understanding of the cost and we can report back.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
It's a holiday.
And are there any other questions or comments on the motion?
Carried.
Okay, carried. Any other business? Adjournment? Okay, and our next meeting is November the 4th. Thank you.